All right, well, let me introduce Dave Rosenfield from Solar Rights Alliance. He's here today. Solar Rights Alliance is the consumer advocacy group for all of our customers out there, both residential and commercial. And today we're going to be talking about NEM 3.0 and the impact this is going to have or likely to have on future solar projects and those that are in the works, and try to provide some clarity for our customers and maybe the rest of the world, Dave, because we're hoping to post this online, of what it's going to look like in a post NEM 3.0 world, and what the differences are between NEM 2.0 and 3.0. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and get started.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Rosenfeld. I'm the director of the Solar Rights Alliance, and I'm going to do a short 15-20-minute presentation, and then we'll obviously do Q&A and other stuff. All right, so let's talk about rooftop solar. So we are the nonprofit association of California solar users, and we believe that everybody has the right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference by the utility. We keep track of what the politicians and the regulators and the utilities are up to, and then we alert the public when there's a threat to solar or an opportunity to expand solar. We have about 100,000 people on our list. Most of our, list is probably what you would call like residential solar users, but we always keep commercial solar, which I know is a part of this audience, very much in the same mind's eye. Even if it's like a smaller number, obviously it's big by capacity and smaller in terms of like number of systems, but the interests as far as we're concerned are the same. And so, just some of what I'm talking about will seem resi focused, but just know that I'm going to talk to specifically the impacts on the commercial market as well. And we see that as one and the same. Our board of directors is made up of solar users, and I'm the one and only paid staff person. And otherwise it's, we're volunteer driven. So the bottom line is that the CPUC, in November, put out a proposal to make changes to net metering, and which is the underlying policy that has driven this growth of solar. And this is the second major proposal that they have made in the course of the last year. The first one was a total dumpster fire of a proposal that, even the governor basically said, no way. So they put out a new one, and it's still a dumpster fire. It's way too extreme, and it would make it much more expensive for both residential and non-residential, anyway, basically people to go solar going forward. And so let's talk about what that is, and also how we're fighting it and how you can fight it, most importantly. We've got about a week before a decision is going to get made, and we've traveled a long way. And so let's get into it. So first, I think it just bears I always think it bears repeating, even with a crowd that is very much invested in solar. Why do we need more rooftop solar? And I think this is useful for you when you're out in the wild, making your case to elected officials, the media, other people, just why this is a fight that matters. And so the first thing is just that people should have more control over their energy bills. And when I say people, I mean people in institutions. So this would be obviously renters as well as homeowners. It would be churches, it would be schools, it would be businesses, it would be farms, and also obviously households. And we now have a technology where people don't have to make the kinds of awful choices that they've had to make over whether to keep the heater or the cooling going or pay their grocery bill. But then there's the issue of blackouts. And so of course we know that solar paired with a battery is the only way really that an individual consumer, either at a church level or a school or a household, can protect themselves from blackouts. And blackouts are the new reality. I mean, we avoided it narrowly, major rolling blackouts this last year, but that week that we were in flex alert hell was not good. And this is really the only solution, is to do solar and batteries at scale behind the meter. So that's another reason you can't charge a battery unless you got solar. So you got to have both. And so we need more rooftop solar that way. Then, there's just the issue of like the state being consistent with what it says it wants to do. So the state, whether you like it or not, and some people love it and some people don't like it, the state is committed to, over the next decade, getting off fossil fuels. And essentially, think about what the project is, what the state is saying is basically by 2035, the state wants all the energy right now that we use by burning fossil fuels, all the cars we drive, right? All the natural gas we use, all the appliances, which is most of our energy use. In the next, by 2035, the state is saying that's all going to come from renewable energy. And not only that, but we're going to take all of that energy right now that we currently burn, and we're going to stuff it through the wires of PG&E, Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. That's what essentially the state is saying it wants to do in the next 12 years. And to do that, just think about how hard that is, what they're wanting to do. And I'm just noticing somebody's in the waiting room, just FYI. In order to do that, just solar alone, we're going to have to triple it. That's literally the state itself. Their planners are saying that we're going to have to triple all forms of solar, both large scale and rooftop, by 2035. All right. And so we have to keep rooftop solar growing, because if you don't, then the state's not going to meet its goals, and then it's just going to be a total disaster. Then, of course, there's just other things like just solar and wind farms come with other downsides, like the use of open space, habitat, and all of that kind of stuff. And, the cartoon kind of tells that story. So there's a lot of different reasons why. But I think there's another, and then I think this is kind of just gives you a sense of really where the state is at. So these bars essentially is the current pace of solar development. The blue is utility scale solar, and the yellow is distributed solar, rooftop solar. And you can see it's about half and half. So that's kind of amazing too. In case you were ever wondering, it's about half and half. And over here is where we are today. Over here is where the state says we need to be by 2035. And over here is where we are going to be if, at the current pace of solar development. So we're actually not on pace right now for the state to meet its goal. So to then scale back over here, half of the whole thing, basically keep us flat, right? And go backwards. It's like literally cutting off your knees, cutting off your legs. And so that's, we need to be speeding up all forms of solar, including rooftop, not slowing it down. But there's a fourth reason why we ought to be increasing rooftop solar, which is that it saves everybody money, even if you don't have solar. So you might have heard some of the lies that the utility and the CPUC have been putting out about rooftop solar. And so I just want to make it really, really clear. The most detailed energy modeling that has ever been done found that if we keep growing rooftop solar and batteries, that actually is $120 billion cheaper over the next 30 years than if we just rely on solar and wind farms alone. And the main reason why is because when people make and store and share their own energy locally, they use the long distance power lines less. And when you don't use those long distance power lines as much, it reduces wear and tear and means that the utilities don't spend as much money maintaining and building long distance power lines. And that is in fact the main thing, is the reason why we're paying out of our noses for electricity bills, is long distance power lines. And rooftop solar and batteries, and rooftop solar alone, but especially with batteries, reduces it. And over the next 30 years, literally reduces it by $120 billion. And if we get rid of rooftop solar and just do it through large scale alone. So everybody saves money with rooftop solar, even if they don't have rooftop solar. Those are the four main reasons why we ought to keep it growing, not shrink it. Rooftop solar, and then just to kind of give you a sense of the footprint, it's growing fastest in working middle class neighborhoods. Just under half of all new solar is going into middle and working class neighborhoods. This is from the Berkeley lab, which does solar demographics. I think this is really cool, this is 2021. So this is the number of households that went solar that make $50,000 a year or less. This is the number of solar households that went solar in 2021 that made $250,000 or more. So this is the trend line, folks. And still, most solar is in the hands of wealthier people. But the trend line over the last 5 years is that it's getting to the point where we're almost at the point where solar is something like cars and TVs and cell phones, where everybody has it. And over here, this is rooftop solar adoption by capita and per capita. And the highest per capita solar adoptions by county are in some of the most low-income counties in the state, in the Central Valley and kind of just outside of the urban areas. And for those of you that do multifamily home development, you kind of know this intuitively. I mean, we're just starting to crack the nut on multifamily home solar, but it's happening. And, affordable housing developers tell us that they rely on net metering as a way to make the rents cheaper, to build more units. And then obviously, we work a lot with faith, houses of worship that are really looking at solar as a way for them to be able to free up their budgets, do more good works for the community. Schools are needing the solar in order to be able to free up their budgets to hire more teachers and do all these things. So it kind of makes sense. So then the issue at hand is net metering. I'm not going to explain what it is, but that's what the utilities hate. The reason why they hate it is kind of obvious. They're a monopoly and they're used to you paying them. And their whole thing is like, no, we don't pay you, you pay us. And so just completely, they hate it. And then, of course, what we were saying before, they hate it because they make money building and maintaining more long distance power lines, but we reduce the need to have to do that as much. And that takes profits off the table for them. But we're going to get into that in a little bit more. So the issue is the utilities want to basically gut net metering. They want to gut that credit that you get for sharing your extra solar energy with the grid. The three major players in this whole thing are the utilities on the one side, which are relentlessly lobbying the government to try to gut net metering. You have the official deciders, which is the California Public Utilities Commission, which is an independent agency of unelected commissioners who are appointed by the governor, who is the leader of the state. And so the governor has a say here too, unofficially, but still, I say unofficially, but really the governor is the most important decision maker here. And even though the CPUC is ostensibly an independent agency, everybody in Sacramento politics knows that the governor decides what the CPUC is going to do. Absolutely. And that's not just Governor Newsom. That is every governor that has come before Governor Newsom. If the governor wants something to happen or not happen at the CPUC, it happens. And that's just common knowledge in Sacramento. So don't let anyone tell you anything otherwise. It is the CPUC is the official decision maker. This is the unofficial decision maker. And these guys are the protagonists who are trying to make something happen. So they put out a proposal on November 10th. And the bottom line is that it would overnight do a 75% cut on average to the net metering credit. And it would be the most extreme cut to the net metering credit in the entire country. That's just on average. For commercial systems, it would be 80% or more, like overnight. You'd basically go down to about 5 cents a kilowatt hour from where it is today. There would be no cushion, whereas there's like a tiny little, I even hesitate to call it a cushion because it's just a little bit more like, you know, we're going to throw you off a cliff, but for some segment of the market, you know, they'll give you, you know, a bag of popcorn to go along with it, whereas everybody else, they just send off a cliff. So it really is a distinction without a difference, but I'm just kind of calling that out. So that's essentially what the proposal is. It will slash the monthly bill savings. It'll obviously increase utility profits because now they get to profit on the extra solar that you're sharing with the grid. Even though you were the one that paid for it, they didn't pay for it. It'll lengthen the payback period for a solar investment from right now an average of like 5 to 6 years to more than 10 years. And it basically just upends the economics for most solar consumers, regardless of whether you're commercial or residential. It would make both standalone solar systems and solar paired with a battery more expensive than it is today. It'll certainly make low-income solar more expensive. And you know, this is sort of intuitive. Anyone that has any familiarity with solar would know this. But everywhere that the net metering credit has been cut, even not as drastic as what's on the table here, has seen solar adoptions drop by half or more. And so we've seen this in Nevada and Hawaii and Arizona. We've even seen it here in California. So some of the locally run utilities, Modesto, Turlock, and the Imperial Irrigation District, kind of Coachella Valley, made similar cuts to their net metering credit. And again, same thing, solar adoptions just plummet by half. We go backwards. A little bit about the details. So the credit for surplus energy would drop from, again, this is all kind of depends on where you are and what your particular system is, but the average is about 30 cents a kilowatt hour today. It would drop down to about 5 cents. There's a little bit of an adder for PG&E and Edison residential customers that makes it maybe not, it won't be 5 cents right away. It's more like 6 to 8 cents right away, but it eventually goes down to 5 cents. So it's not really much of an anything, but I just mention it. And low income customers on the CARE program would get a little bit more too, but again, it would still be more expensive for low income. And then the adder basically just decreases over the next 5 years until it's basically down to 5 cents. So that's kind of the technicalities, but there is no adder if you're an SDG&E, and there's no adder if you're a commercial, solar. So you're just going right off the cliff to about 5 cents, 6 cents right away. And that's essentially the CPUC proposal. This goes into effect about 120 days after the CPUC votes. The CPUC is right now scheduled to vote next Thursday. And if they vote next Thursday, that means that this new system would start on April 15th of next year. In their proposal, and their proposal is totally subject to change between now and then, is any completed application that is submitted to the utility prior to the sunset date will be locked into the current system, NEM 2. It has to be correct and completed, and it's got to be in before the sunset date, so got to be in by April 14th. And and when I'm saying application, I mean the interconnection application to the utility. I'm not talking about the permitting or any of the stuff that you do with the local municipality. That's separate. It's just the interconnection application has to be into the utility by then. Otherwise, you're on this new system, whatever it is. Current solar users on NEM 2 or NEM 1 can add a battery. So if you decide you want to add a battery a year or 2 or 3 from now, you can do that without affecting your net metering status. But current solar users who want to add more panels after the sunset date could get forced onto net metering 3, this new system, if the system that you're adding is either 1 kilowatt or 10% greater than what you have right now, which is basically means if you're going to add panels, you're probably going to get forced onto NEM 3. So you can't expand your system without affecting your net metering status. You can add a battery under this thing. And then for homeowners, residential, if a current solar user on NEM 2 sells their home after the sunset date, that new owner will have to be on this new system, NEM 3. So those are kind of the details of implementation. A couple of things that are not in the CPUC's proposal and some caveats with that. So there's no solar tax in this proposal. If you've been following the story, you'll know that has been on the table almost this entire year. The solar tax, and so that's one thing. And then the other thing that's not on the table right now is making retroactive changes on existing solar users. So if you're on NEM 1 or NEM 2, this would not affect you until your grandfathering is done. So grandfathering, the way it works is you get to stay on your current net metering arrangement for 20 years from the date that the utility turned on your system. And so this proposal would not affect that. However, after that 20-year period, you would then be forced onto this new system, whatever it is. So, but I wouldn't breathe too easy, because the CPUC, number one, in their proposal indicated they didn't back off on the rationale for a solar tax. They just essentially said, we're going to pick this up again next year. So we're going to have to fight the solar tax next year, probably. And then the second thing is that right now, the utilities are lobbying the CPUC to get retroactive changes back in to the proposal. So we could see next week a revision to the revised proposal that has retroactive changes. So I would nobody should be breathing easy here. I'm just telling you what's in the proposal, but I'm also trying to be really, really clear. There's a long road we have to travel in the next week before they vote. And there's just no reason we have to trust the decision makers here. No reason whatsoever. And then of course, if you don't have solar, or if you care about people who don't have solar that might want it someday, this is going to completely, upend the economics and make it very, very difficult for people to get solar going forward. So of course, I would appeal for you to care about this, on that basis alone. Let me skip over this slide because it's mostly about residential, and I think we want to mostly talk about commercial. So just in case you're wondering, so what's the CPUC's rationale? The CPUC's rationale is basically the same as the utilities, which is that you solar users are freeloaders. You are delinquents. You are basically people that took your ball and went home. You're just a bunch of rich people who took your ball, went home. You make your own energy. You don't pay your fair share of the grid, and as a result, you basically force everyone who doesn't have solar to pick up the tab. And in fact, they claim that you are responsible, that non-solar users have to pay $3 to $6 billion more in electricity bills because of you skipping out on paying your fair share. That's what the CPUC and the utilities together are saying is the reason why they need to do this. So you may be wondering, is there any truth to that? And the answer is no. The real thing that's causing electricity bills to go up is long distance power lines. Last year, ratepayers were charged about $9 billion total, both for the building and the maintenance of long distance power lines and the wildfire mitigation that now has to go along with it. Utilities get a guaranteed profit building and maintaining long distance power lines. This is absolutely how they make their money. Rooftop solar reduces the need to have to do that, as I was saying earlier, which reduces their profits. And that's what this fight is all about. They're trying to find a scapegoat to basically deflect attention away from the racket that they have with long distance power lines so that they can keep that whole gravy train going and at the same time kill off the main thing that is reducing their profits. And so this is like well substantiated stuff that this is just rooftop solar, if anything, is reducing the cost for everybody, not increasing it. So it's just the opposite is true. And so I just want to point you again to this chart and some of the most detailed energy modeling that's ever been done. It strongly suggests that over the next 30 years, rooftop solar can cut $120 billion in costs out of the system, saving all ratepayers an average of about $300 per ratepayer per year. Okay, so then how is it that California can justify cutting solar while pushing this whole clean energy, go green thing at the same time? And the answer is, I wish it was more complicated, but it's pretty simple. The utilities spent about $44 million in campaign contributions and lobbying from between 2017 and 2021. That is a breathtaking amount of money. I can assure you that the solar industry has not even come close to that, and nor just kind of clean energy advocates in general. And then the other thing, as a result of all of this incredible influence that the utilities have, the CPUC itself, when they do their math, because it's not like they just go, oh yeah, we're shills of the utility, so thus we're going to do this. They have math and they provide it, and they provide very, very detailed studies that on the face of it have the appearance of some kind of like thoughtful, reasoned, analysis. But the actual consultants that do their math they're literally utility consultants. So that one of the main firms, E3, is, if you go and look at their client list, this is the firm that the CPUC has hired to do their math. Their clients are the utilities, all of them, not just the ones in California, but all of the North American utilities. And that's literally who has been hired by the CPUC to do their math. It's like the biggest conflict of interest I could even come up with, and it's completely legal, and nobody in Sacramento even blinks at it. So the foxes are literally in the hen house. So then that's all the bad news. And then the good news is, we should remember, this is like, we actually have a shot at saving rooftop solar. It's incredibly popular. Californians of all political persuasions, poll after poll after poll, and we have done the polling. It's really, really clear that rooftop solar is incredibly popular, whether you have solar or not. People want it. They support net metering specifically, even when we give them the opposition's arguments, that mostly they don't buy it. Major newspapers have taken our side across the state. And then the public, more people have gotten involved in this campaign over the last year than any other issue in CPUC history. About 170,000 Californians have written or called or marched or testified to the CPUC. We organize, I mean, it's just like, people have attended these rallies with thousands of people coming to rallies over and over and over again. We did rallies last week in 10 cities simultaneously with 500 people attending, media attention all over the place. It is really, I've been a campaigner for 30 years, and I have never seen an issue quite like this, with people from every possible political orientation you can imagine, is very, very clearly united on, we should be keeping rooftop solar growing. Net metering is a good policy. This is clearly a giveaway to the utilities. And that's going to be our saving grace if there's going to be one here. So again, these are the players. And really the big question here is, Governor Newsom has not taken a position yet on this, and we've got a week to go. And so everything that we're doing is about encouraging the governor to be a leader here, step in, save his own clean energy agenda, and just do right by the people. And so we can get into specific calls to action, but let me stop my thing here, and there may be questions and things like that.
So let's start with a couple about what happens if you live outside, or your project is outside of a major utility area.
Yeah.
One of the major
so like if you're
utilities.
LADWP or SMUD or whatever. Yeah. So well, first off, if you're SMUD, you've kind of already seen this, because SMUD last year voted to slash its net metering program very significantly and upend the economics there. And we're just now beginning to see the effects. Imperial Irrigation District just did away with net metering, Turlock and Modesto as well. The other ones, generally municipal utilities track with the CPUC. There's a little bit of a lag time, but whatever the CPUC does, they eventually do it. Obviously, the big banana would be if the CPUC does completely, and obviously our intention is to save rooftop solar, but let's say the CPUC does the deed. I think obviously all eyes would be on LA to just see what happens, and that'll be a political fight, like anything. So no idea, but so goes the CPUC. Generally, that's how the munis will go. So, I would encourage people that are in, where your utility is a muni to, fight like your solar depends on it. And then in the case of SMUD, where we lost that fight, we haven't given up there either. And that board needs to be replaced. Frankly, it's an elected board, and there's amazing people in the community who are trying to basically crack the old boy network. It's an old boy and an old girl network of insiders there, and try to return SMUD to its former glory as a utility that actually stands up for people, which it's totally lost its way. So so not directly affected, but I encourage you to see it as your fight.
Thank you. What is the minimum you need to do to get a job or a project into NEM 2? before
gotta get
April 14th, 15th deadline.
Yeah, you got to get your interconnection application to the utility by whatever the sunset date is going to be. So again, we don't know what the sunset date is until they make a decision. It's 100. The proposal said 120 days after their decision. The proposal might change, and the date they make a decision might change. So you got to follow the decision. You got to follow. Is it 120 days? And then you got to get that interconnect, and the interconnection application has to be correct. So you got to really work with your installer and make sure that that's done correctly. Try to get the project done as quickly as you can so that, you've got lead time in case the interconnection application, has some issues with it. But if you get it in, according to this proposal, let's assume that doesn't change, then you're on NEM 2.
Yeah, I think that number one is, the earlier you move, the better, the more likely you are to secure NEM 2. It's a great policy that we have in place today, and it's going to be their maximum savings, right? Anything from 3.0 is not going to be incrementally better than where we are in NEM 2.0. And from our perspective as an installer, right, exactly what you said, Dave, some of these commercial projects can be quite difficult with the interconnection work that needs to be done, and getting it in front of our engineering team so that we can get in front of the utility and have a chance for a revision if we do have some pushback, because it's got to be a completed application, right? So it's going to be submitted complete, which means no errors, no back and forth. So it's not just I grab my ticket from the deli counter, right? My ticket from the deli counter has to be absolutely validated that it's accurate.
Yeah, and although I'm ever the optimist about how we can move the needle, I think it's pretty safe bet that NEM 2 will be better than NEM 3. The economic, for sure.
And then we also had a question about modeling the payback between NEM 2 and NEM 3. Is there a way to be able to see what the actual payback for a specific project or system would look like on NEM 3 versus NEM 2?
Yeah, we've had a couple of customers ask this, and it's preliminarily there, SK. What we model our designs off of is energy tool based. So we can give a customer an estimate of obviously what their savings would look like under NEM 2.0 with their current utility rate and the current proposal in place. But there are models out there for the big three utilities to show what it would look like under the avoided cost calculator and this drastic reduction in the export credits. One caveat to that is, from our perspective, is that assumes we have your interval data, and we didn't do this off utility bills and estimates, because that's really becomes a lot more dangerous to estimate what the impact is, because time of use is going to play into it. But if you think about on a commercial side, right, it could be that your AC cuts on and off at a certain time of the day, and when one 15-minute interval you're making, you're offsetting your energy usage, and then another you're completely underwater because you have no energy usage on site because the HVAC is cycled off. And it is a 15-minute window that they're going to be looking at the usage versus the exports. So it's what you exported during that time and what the net benefit was. So it's even worse that it's not over the course of an hour or a day or a longer period of time, which would help us significantly with the savings. Is that right, Dave? Is that your understanding too?
Yeah.
Great. And then Dave, I think you touched a little bit on this, but we've seen some questions around what happens if I expand my system, or if I need to add a battery later on. How does that affect if I'm on NEM 1 or NEM 2? Will that automatically push me onto NEM 3?
Yeah, so it depends. If it's a battery, it depends if it's a battery or if you're expanding your system. So if you're on NEM 1 and NEM 2, this is according to the proposal, which again might change, so pay attention to what's going on. That's my take-home message. Pay attention, everyone. Is if you're on NEM 1 and NEM 2, and this proposal passes, and somewhere down the road, past a cutoff date, you want to add a battery, you can add a battery and stay on NEM 1 and NEM 2. However, if you're on NEM 1 and NEM 2 and you decide you want to expand your system, add more panels past a cutoff date, if you expand any more than 10% of your existing capacity, you're going to get pushed onto NEM 3. So if you are thinking of expanding your system, you may want to do it now, not later. I mean, I don't need to editorialize on this, but just how ludicrous that is. Here's a state that telling people you're going to have to buy an electric car, and only electric car by 2035, but not everybody's going to be able to get an electric car, right now. And so it'll be later when people are going, maybe I should add some more panels to charge that car. But sorry, you're out of luck. And so, again, either the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, or it's just an intentional, way for the utilities to just sabotage everything. We'll see. You can choose whatever you think. But again, the situation begs for leadership from the guy at the top.
Thank you for walking us through this. I really appreciate it. SK, thanks for hosting the meeting. And well,
Thank
thank
you
you.
again,
We really
Dave.
appreciate you joining us today and getting to answer some questions about a very complex topic that we get a lot of questions about. I learned a couple of things, so I really appreciate you joining us.
All
and
right.
go fight the good fight. We're rooting for you.
Go fight, win. Yeah. Thanks for everything you all are doing. Bye-bye.
Thank you.